Welcome to the third part of Learn Codea by Making a Game. In this tutorial, we'll be focusing on Z sorting. So as you can see here, the knight is behind the coin when it's behind it. But if we step around the coin, we notice that the knight is in front of this coin. So we'll be making this scene you see over here work by the end of this episode. And this will be a rather short one, so hopefully enjoy and have fun. Okay, let's open the project from last time. Before we get started with Z sorting, the first thing we want to do is to create this coin so that we can have something to sort with. We first create the coin entity. Afterwards, we add a sprite animator component and set the FPS to 12. We first set up the animator by setting the sheet to the yellow coin sprite sheet, and we set the size to 16 by 16. We make row 1 to be coin active animation, and we make row 2 to be coin die animation, and then we play coin active. Afterwards, we add a physics body. Then we set the X position to 5 and the Y position to -2. Okay, let's go and run this project. As you can see, the coin is moving very nicely. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some Z sorting. Before we start coding the Z sorter, let me explain what Z sorting is real quick. Okay, let's imagine we have our scene and a list. I'm going to add a circle in the scene list just for learning purposes. As you can see, the circle is on top, the knight is in the middle, and the coin is in below. What we want to do in Z sorting is make entities that are on top to be in the front of the list and entities that are below to be at the end of the list. Let's rearrange the scene. Now, the coin is on top, the knight is below, and the circle is in the middle. But if we actually stack them on top of each other, we will notice something very strange. Now, the circle is in front of the coin, but it's also in front of the knight, which looks strange. We want the circle to be behind the knight, but in front of the coin. If we Z sort this list, meaning that we put the coin behind the circle and the circle behind the knight, we will see the result that we want. This is what Z sorting is. We put the stuff on top on the front of the list and the stuff below on the back of the list. That's why the stuff on top gets rendered first and the stuff below gets rendered last. Okay, now it's time to create the Z sorter class. We have the created function and the update function. For the created function, we will leave it empty. In the update function, we create a list that contains all the sprite entities in our scene. We get only the sprite entities because we want to only sort the entities with images and not ones that don't have any. In the for loop, we loop over all the entities in the scene and only retrieve the entities that have a sprite and store them in the list. We get all the entities of the list using this function. The self.scene references the scene that the entity is in. Afterwards, we sort the sprite entities by putting the ones that are on top first and the ones below after using this function. Lastly, in this for loop, we sort all the entities. In the parameters of the for loop, we loop up till the second to last entity number of the list. So if suppose we have 6 elements of the list, we'll only loop up to 5. Inside of the list, we get the current entity that's being looped and the entity that's right after it. This is just the entity that is right below the entity based on the Y position. Finally, we move the current entity before the next entity. That way it looks like the next entity is on top of the current entity, making it look like it's being sorted. The move before function does this task. So basically, the scene has a list which has all the entities it contains, and entities that are on the top of the list are rendered first. So what we want to do is make the entities that are on top, like the higher Y position, are rendered first. That way they seem to be behind the entities that are below, which we're going to do for Z sorting. Okay, so now that we've written the class, let's go back to the main function. And let's add these 2 lines of code, which basically creates a Z sorter entity and adds the Z sorter component which we made before. And let's run the project. So if you can see, if we move the knight and we move right behind the coin, you see that the knight is behind the coin when it's just behind it. But if we now go in front of the coin, we see that the knight is now in front of the coin. So our Z sorter is working. Okay, that concludes this episode for Z sorting. In the next episode, we'll be making collisions so that we can actually go and collide with this coin, and it isn't just a decoration, but it can be something we can interact with. So please subscribe and have a nice day.